This is Moving Soulward, the podcast about growing a business at the intersection of strategy, spirituality, and self-care. We're your hosts, Katie McLaughlin, your Be Good guide, and
Maria Spiralis, the lunar lawyer. We love a good inspirational story, but we're not interested in just profits or bottom lines. Though don't get us wrong, those things are important.
in Moving Soulward, expect to hear conversations with entrepreneurs who are at all different stages of building a business, with two important things in common. Success means something different to each of them, and you don't have to sell your soul to get what you want.
Prioritizing stillness, systems, energies, and service are all valuable and necessary parts of mindful entrepreneurship. Now grab your favorite card deck, a warm mug, spark up a candle, and listen in. Welcome back to Moving Soulward. In this episode, we're going to be talking to Maddie Frias.
In this episode, we cover how through the discovery of breathwork, she dove deeper into yoga and then Vedic astrology. And we'll talk through the differences and similarities between both Vedic and Western astrology, and then how she navigated through the music business mid-pandemic back to spiritual entrepreneurship.
Maddie, welcome to the Moving Soulward podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, we just kind of gave everyone a very quick overview of your background, but can you give us a brief description of what you do?
Yes. So I am a Vedic astrologer, yoga teacher, and breathwork facilitator. To kind of summarize it, I think of myself as a mindfulness facilitator, and I will die on this hill. Astrology is mindfulness. And basically, I help women connect back with themselves, embody the current moment, because I think, especially nowadays, we can get in this very robotic almost place where we're kind of just going with the motion. We're acting on autopilot, and using breathwork, yoga, and astrology, we can really kind of ground back down into the current moment and just become more aware.
That's so true. I love that you are a slashy, to steal a Zoolander term, yoga
Love
slash
that.
breathwork slash Vedic astrology. But it all comes back to, like you said, that overarching theme of mindfulness.
Mhm.
What was first? Yoga, breathwork, astrology?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. So, breathwork and astrology kind of came to me at the same time. Breathwork was the first one that I really dove into professionally and took training with, and astrology came more as a hobby at the time, but it was just something that was fascinating to me, and I eventually just kept going with it. I took a training with my teacher that I found, and astrology's kind of turned out to be my main thing, but breathwork was, I think, the first thing that really piqued my interest, and I really just dove into headfirst.
With breathwork being first, how did you first hear about or experience breathwork?
So it's actually a funny story because I almost don't remember all the details how I found it. I remember I found the teacher that I learned through is Ava Johanna. And I remember seeing it was around New Year's in 2020. This is when kind of everything changed. And I saw a Facebook ad for a meditation challenge that she had. It was like a 21-day meditation challenge. And I think I only did a couple days of it, but I remember her mentioning breath work and how breath work itself is a tool to deepen meditation. And I've always meditated. It's just, I grew up very spiritual. My mom raised us to be very spiritual, and meditation was just kind of something we always did. And so in 2020, at that time, I had just graduated college, literally December 2019. Pandemic hit. I had my first job where when the pandemic hit, I thankfully was not let go, but I worked at an entertainment business management firm. And because of the pandemic, nobody was really doing anything. So there wasn't much to do. And so I had all this space. In college, I had 2 or 3 jobs at a time. I'm studying and doing my best to get good grades and graduate. So I didn't really have time to think or be or really feel into anything. And then as soon as I graduated, it was like the noise had just flatlined. There was so much space. And I was just looking for a tool to kind of help process and feel into everything that I wasn't able to feel for 3.5 years that I was in college, and then all the craziness of high school and then moving to Nashville and all of that. And breathwork was the first thing that worked to shut my mind up and allow me to really get in the present moment and feel into my body. So that's how I found it, was just that meditation challenge. And I think one of the first tools or specific breathwork practices I used was Kapalabhati, or breath of fire. And that can be a really intense breath. And for some reason, it took me forever to really understand how to do it. But it is so good for getting you into your body, shutting up your mind, and um, really just getting in the present moment. Yeah.
That's amazing. It sounds like you pretty quickly found out about it and then was like, "How do I do this?" And then, like, dove in. And so even though you had been in this sort of, what I would say, kind of still in the hustle culture mode in college, it
Yes.
was that same, and we often find this, that same sort of drive to learn, to grow, to find out, that same thing that you were applying during that time when everything was quieter. It was like, ooh, once you latch onto something, then it's, ooh, I want to learn about that. I want to put that into practice. I want to integrate that into my routine. So it sounds like once you were aware of it, you were like, let me figure out how to do this. So you mentioned a couple of trainings. What was that like time period looking like? Was it like you took a course and then you did a lot of self-study? What does that journey look like?
So I did self study and just like doing guided practices on like YouTube and stuff for a while. And I want to say it was later that year I had quit my job at the entertainment business management firm, and I was working at a library. And I don't even remember what prompted me to just like dive into this. But Ava Johanna has the Academy of Breath, which is her breathwork facilitator training. And I just knew I needed to do it. I actually think the night that I signed up, I had a glass of wine and I was just like, I want to do this so bad. And I just got out my credit card. I signed up. I was like, you know what? I'm in. And it just happened like that, and it was great. I'm so glad that I just took the leap and did it, because I think, as you can probably tell, I have a tendency to overthink everything.
Don't we all?
Yeah, and so I'm glad I just took the chance.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of, I know I personally can think back to a bunch of moments where it felt like a more than just, oh, that would be cool, but like, oh, I should do that. Like a definitive, like internal yes, not really knowing like where it's coming from, but being like, yeah, this is the moment that I need to go deeper. This is the moment that I need to sign up for that training. Or this is the moment that I need to do something that's always led to that snowball effect, at least in my career, of like, how do these things all come together? So, talking about that, how did that, or did that snowball into astrology, or at this point were you already like looking into Vedic astrology? How did those two start to connect, or did they ever connect, or have they been largely separate?
So it's interesting because they were kind of always intertwined. I was definitely studying both pretty much at the same time, but it's really interesting because the breath work that I do is from the same lineage as Vedic astrology. This all comes from the yogic tradition, the Vedic tradition. So the breath work that I do is pranayama, and it is yogic breath work. And Vedic astrology, again, comes from the same lineage and is actually a sister science to yoga and Ayurveda specifically. And so I never thought of them as connected or using them together, but after really understanding both, it all comes from the same place, which I thought was so interesting. And what actually ended up happening was pranayama, my breathwork training. It was the next logical step for me was, okay, now I'm trained and it's specifically yogic breathwork. So now let me get into yoga studios. And so I found a studio in town that I have been pretty much working with ever since, Heart of Wisdom Yoga, wonderful studio. And eventually pranayama snowballed into me doing a teacher training this year. which is funny because most people do it the other way around. They become a yoga teacher and then they do trainings in breathwork specifically, but I just happen to do it the other way. But something really interesting that I found is that Vedic astrology really connects to it because specifically Ayurveda, because a lot of Ayurvedic practitioners actually pull people's Vedic astrology charts to see their kind of natural doshic makeup. And it's just really cool to see how these traditions all just kind of flow into each other, but haven't really found a way to necessarily dig into them together. I think it would be kind of cool to use breathwork practices to help balance dosha, but I feel like that's a whole other study in itself.
Yeah, it feels the difference between a specialty versus going to a specialty doctor versus going to a functional medicine doctor. That's like diagnosing using all these different tools, and then you go back to this
Yeah.
into a specialty or something. So it's very interesting that they all connect and they all not necessarily are in the same speak the same language, but they're in the same like vicinity and they're in the same sort of ideals. So from there, what did you always know that this was like going to be your business path? This is all very different from being in a music management job. And so, what sort of has inspired you to pursue this as a business or this line of work as a business?
I think it is the soulfulness that comes from this business. From the time I was a sophomore in high school, I wanted to be in the music business. Originally, the plan was to be the next Taylor Swift. I wanted to write songs, I wanted to sing. Next thing I know, I cannot sing in front of people. Literally, my voice shakes so much and changes, and I cannot control it. And so that then snowballed into, okay, then I'll work in the business side, or maybe I'll just be a songwriter. Other people can sing and I'll just write lyrics. And it's funny because even doing that, there's an aspect of, okay, well, you need to share what these lyrics are supposed to sound like, what's the flow of it. And I was like, okay, never mind. I'm going to work in publishing. I'm going to help songwriters. Very hard field to get into. And it just kept snowballing into this, well, okay, this doesn't really work. So let me try this. And eventually I get to this entertainment business management firm as like accounting support. And I just was like, I'm burnt out on the industry. I'd had
Mhm.
however many internships, all of this stuff. And I finally, in that time where I finally had space to be like, okay, what do I really want? The music industry wasn't necessarily it anymore, which is funny because I still work in the industry, but I'm now want to build this soulful business where one, I have freedom. Freedom is such a big value for me and a lot of other spiritual entrepreneurs, but I think it's also just the idea that I can help people and help women have that same kind of transformation where you almost just don't know what to feel. You don't know what you truly want. And to help kind of open those doors and shed some light on how to give yourself that space to make that transformation and also just like truly understand who we are. Because especially growing up in college and high school, you're trained to just, okay, what's the next thing? What are you doing in college? Okay, now you're in college. What are you doing so you can get this job? Okay, now that you have all these internships and all of this, okay, now you have to get the job. Now you have the job. You have to keep the job and get promoted and do all this stuff. And it's just kind of like this never ending ladder, and we don't allow ourselves that time to really listen to ourselves. And so I think that having breath work and using it to help create that kind of sacred space to where we can listen to ourselves, and using astrology to help us understand our natural tendencies, our natural gifts, using that to just help women grow into themselves is just so beautiful and fulfilling.
That's amazing. I think just there's definitely a thread that we see in talking to the speakers of like how that sort of soul led and contributing to more than just like a business is more, it becomes more than a business. It's like contributing to that overall well-being of other people, but then also that comes back to your own overall well-being. So you're supporting other people in preventing burnout and things, but you're also then preventing that for yourself as well, right? So I think that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Maddie, I'm curious, as you balance these kind of two sides of your life, the entertainment side and this more mindful business side, how you get your clients and how you've built a client base.
So, a lot of it right now is honestly just word of mouth. It's funny because I took a lot of last year, towards the end of last year, to just like experiment. And I actually used a lot of my coworkers as like my guinea pigs. I would just be like, hey, can I just read your chart? I just want to know what might be going on here and if you connect with it. And so eventually I just started doing that. And honestly, Creative Soul Sisterhood was such a beautiful space for me to meet the right people to get those clients because I found most of them right now are just the people that I love and I'm surrounded by, and the people who are also kind of in this spiritual, soulful entrepreneurship space. And yeah, and I think it's also fun because I've gotten to do a lot of readings for people who have already had their Western charts done. And so it's really cool being able to almost hold this mirror to a different angle so they can see the Vedic side and like, how does this differ, but also how does it feel the same? But my client base currently is just word of mouth. That's honestly most of what I can handle right now, which I don't hate. And I also kind of love like knowing a person before reading their chart because I can kind of like almost make guesses about what's going on or look at something and be like, oh, okay, that's why this is happening, or that's why you kind of act this way or something. So, yeah.
I definitely remember on more than one occasion, you're so good and timely coming to Creative Soul Sisterhood networking meetings, and someone would come in and talk about their Vedic chart versus their Western chart. And I never thought that like their whole sun sign changed or whatever it was, but there was definitely more than one
Yep.
reflection like
Yep.
that.
I actually did. There's a Nashville Astrology Club, and I actually did a whole presentation on um, Vedic astrology, where it comes from, and how it's different from Western astrology. And I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed doing that. That honestly, after teaching that, I was like, okay, I need to do this more often because this feels like a zone of genius where I just get so much joy. And yeah, I was nervous, but there was more excitement than nerves, which is very rare for me.
Girl with a lot of Mercury in both of her charts.
Yeah.
Teaching.
Yeah, lots of mercurial energy going on, and it also kind of explains, "Oh, yeah, that's why you went into accounting. Oh, yeah, that's why you work in royalty." Like, it
Mhm.
makes so much sense.
So, what would you say is either a common transformational experience in each of the readings that you do, or maybe a common like surprise that people feel when they're working with you?
Honestly, I really do think it's just that comparing their Western to their Vedic chart, and it's funny because a lot of times, something I've found is that if somebody connects with something really strongly in their Western chart, it often shows up in their Vedic chart, but just in a different way. Like for me specifically, in Western astrology, I am a double Libra, and both sun and rising Libra, and then my moon is in Scorpio. If we go to Vedic astrology, I am a double Virgo sun, Virgo rising, but a Libra moon. And I really connected with the Libra part of me, love the Virgo part of me as well. But it's interesting because you can see like that Libra is still strong there, just in a different way. Instead of sun and rising, now it's the moon, which in Vedic astrology, your moon sign is actually a little more, I guess, important, I would say, and indicative of who you are as a person, even though there are so many different factors in the chart. But I think that's usually what's really interesting is saying, oh, okay, I've heard this in my Western chart, but it's interesting that it also comes up in the Vedic chart. And it's always so fun because you never necessarily learn anything new in about yourself in a reading. But what it does is it's very validating, and it's almost what it is it's understanding your natural tendencies and knowing that we have the free will, even though we are set up a certain way, we have the free will to choose something different. And what astrology does is it brings awareness to those natural tendencies so that we can then choose something different. But I think, yeah, being able to see those similarities between Western and Vedic is what's been really cool about doing client readings and just kind of helping people understand, okay, you're meant to be this way. This isn't because you're mean or this isn't because you're just screwed up. Like, no, you're meant to be this way. This planet is reacting this way to this sign in this area because of this. And so it makes sense. Like, you're not doing something wrong. It's just naturally how you operate. And again, giving them an opportunity to choose something different if they want to.
I feel like you and Katie can and should nerd out about astrology things now.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, because we traded readings. So she's done my Vedic reading and I've done her Western reading. And that was really fascinating. I think for me, it felt like almost like double underlining certain parts of my chart. Not that we were like overlapping the two charts, but that knowing now what shows up in my Vedic versus my Western, I can see more clearly in both that I'm on the right path, which I know intuitively that now I am. But in my Western chart, I have a ton of Aries in the 10th house. And in my Vedic chart, a lot of that moved into Pisces. And here I am working as a spiritual entrepreneur. So that's quite literal. But I did a lot of other entrepreneurial things um before that, and I believe that the teacher arrives when the student is ready. So I didn't know my Western astrology back when I was doing a lot of these other things, but I can see it is exactly what you said, Maddie. There's different pieces that are reinforced in different ways. And so to me, it kind of feels like when you go to the eye doctor and they're flipping, is it one or is it two? Is it one or is it two? And you're like, I can see a little bit of a difference, but I can see perfectly fine with both of them. You're like, you don't really know how to answer that question. And I just think like the more I love self-discovery, so the more information I have about myself, like I will take any personality test that there is. So, but it reinforces, and I think that came up for you too, Maddie, when we did your Western reading. It was like the way that things are reinforced is really fascinating. One thing
Mhm.
though that I remember being very different or being fascinated by is I think there was like one, and I don't remember the name of it, but there was like one level deeper than the house system or the way that the chart is set up that was giving very granular information. And then that was like a bigger tie in Vedic to this sort of like karma and dharma and these other things. Whereas in Western, it's often more like self discovery, psychological. Like I find myself having conversations more about, oh, I can see where maybe there was some childhood trauma or things like that. Whereas in Vedic, there was a layer that you were looking at specifically that was like tied to this sort of like karmic patterning. I don't remember what
Mhm.
that was, but if you want to talk about that a little bit, since that's
Yeah.
Vedic specific.
Yeah, totally. I'm not gonna lie, I can't remember specifically what it is off the top of my head either. But at the core of it, Vedic astrology is really purposed around self-realization and the karma of the soul. And something that you can look at in the Vedic chart that I find so interesting is what karma did your soul come into with this life, and how is that going to move around? And what another thing that I love about Vedic astrology specifically is there's a way to break up the chart even deeper beyond the 12 zodiac into what are called the nakshatras or lunar mansions. There are of
That's the
them.
word that I'm looking for that I would never have remembered.
Yeah. All good. So nakshatras translates to lunar mansions. There's 27 of them. And it kind of, again, just gives us a deeper look into the different aspects of the chart. And what I really love about the nakshatras is that they all have obviously a ruling planet, But they also have a ruling deity and kind of myth that helps dive deeper into the meaning and understanding of each nakshatra. So, where your moon falls specifically, you can look at what nakshatra each planet falls into, but where your moon falls into is supposed to be a little more indicative of the self. It's almost akin to the rising sign. There's like this more specific depth that it can go into. And oh gosh, I'm trying to think of an example. I think the best example of a nakshatra that I can think of is just my own. So in Vedic astrology, my moon is in Libra, and the specific nakshatra in Libra that my moon falls into is the nakshatra of Swati. And it's actually so fascinating because this nakshatra is ruled by the deity Vayu, the god of the winds. The symbol for Swati is a blade of grass blowing in the wind. And what's really interesting is that there's this aspect of breath and pranayama that comes with the god of the wind. And so when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense why I like breath work. But there's this aspect of thinking of the wind, thinking of a blade of grass that's just kind of like blowing in the wind. It boils down to adaptability. It boils down to almost an independence, which I mean, as somebody who was told growing up that they're a Libra, and that is, I feel like, totally not a Libra quality to be independent. It was actually it's very exciting for me to hear that because I don't think I've ever thought of myself as independent before. But looking deeper into that nakshatra, I really got to see that in myself and appreciate that about myself. And it's really cool because these nakshatras can get so deep. There's another one. I've done 2 readings for people who've had their moon in the nakshatra Barney. And I believe, oh gosh, I know the god's name is Yama. I believe it's Yama. But what's really interesting about this nakshatra is that it is symbolized by the yoni and the birth canal. And what's really cool about that is there's this aspect of creativity that comes into this nakshatra, this ability to be able to make something out of nothing. And there's a beautiful mythology behind it. Again, it's totally left my mind right now, but you can definitely look up any of these nakshatras. There's actually so much information about them. It's really beautiful. But yeah, nakshatras, I would say, are probably one of the defining differences between Western and Vedic astrology. I'd love to talk about the main difference that I'm sure everyone is probably wondering is like, oh, how can she be a Libra in one system, but a Virgo in the other? So
Yeah.
cool. I can dive into that because it kind of gets very sciency. But so from my understanding of Western astrology, and Katie, please correct me if I am wrong, the zodiac are based on set seasons. So Aries always begins on the spring equinox, and they kind of follow that same seasonal pattern throughout every year. But what is interesting is that the sun isn't actually in the constellation of Aries at the spring equinox. So, something that ancient Vedic astrologers were able to figure out even way, way back then was that there's actually a wobble in the Earth's tilt. Basically, the kind of like north and south poles make like this figure eight that only completes one specific rotation every 25,000 years. But because of that, it actually changes our orientation to the constellations. So they actually move back 1 degree every 70 to 72 years. And so, because of that, there's currently a 23 to 24 degree difference between Western and Vedic astrology. And this is not at all to say that Western astrology is right and or Western astrology is wrong, Vedic astrology is right. I actually read this beautiful argument for Western astrology that was the zodiac represent aspects of the divine. And how can the divine be boiled down to these changing constellations that move and aren't always in the same place when the divine is ever present, constant, unmoving. So that's why Western astrology doesn't specifically follow the movement of the constellations. And I thought that was really beautiful. And I think that's a beautiful argument. And basically, at the end of the day, something my teacher said to me that I will always kind of remember is that the divine has many different languages. To think that we have completely understood any or all of these languages is very ignorant and short sighted for us humans. And what if astrology is just one of those languages, and then Western astrology is one way to translate it, while Vedic astrology is just another way? There's no right or wrong here. There's so much that we can learn from both, and that can help us in this journey of self realization and universal connection. So I think using both together kind of helps provide this deeper layer into ourselves that we can all have. So that's kind of my spiel to say that one is not right or wrong. It's just different ways of looking at it. I always thought that it was astrology was specifically looking at the planets in the specific constellations. And so that's why when I heard that in Vedic astrology, that's just kind of immediately the lane that I went down. I connected a little more with being a Virgo versus a Libra, even though, again, I still have a lot of Libra energy. So again, there's no right or wrong there. But that is the main difference that most people wonder is why the signs are in different places and how they can be one thing in one system and one thing in the other. There thankfully is a little bit of overlap. I'm thinking specifically of my boyfriend. He's a Pisces either way, which makes a lot of sense for him. And I think I always say this because I think it's kind of funny, but I feel like the people that have the most trouble, Katie's an exception here. The most people that have trouble connecting with their Vedic chart versus their Western is when they're an Aries in Western and then a Pisces in Vedic. I just feel like they're
I
so
could I
out of
could see
each
that.
other.
I could see me having an issue with that previously when
Yeah.
I was first getting into astrology and, like, really identifying with it. But I think that sort of
Yeah.
gets to what you were saying about how these are just different systems or different tools. And even within Western astrology, there's different house systems. There's 7 different ways to read a chart that can also move your sun sign or your rising sign, which is why I get
Mhm.
all the time someone, "Well, CoStar says I'm this." There's a lot of different ways to read the chart. And so I completely agree with everything you're saying that I see it. I always say I see it as a tool and take whatever resonates and leave what doesn't. So astrology is
Mhm.
not something that you necessarily believe in or don't believe in. It's a tool that resonates or it doesn't. Whether you resonate more with your Western or your Vedic or both, in my case, it's all just tools to help you.
100%.
Well, and as the non-astrologer in the room, it sounds just like with astrology versus human design. It's the same little themes and like things are going to show up regardless of which one resonates most with you. It's just a matter of interpretation and which one kind of feels
Yeah,
better.
Yeah,
100%.
100%.
The things that are going to that's why I like to use that term resonating, like the things that resonate, I always say, and this is the part of the chart that you may feel personally attacked by. I love feeling personally attacked by my chart because to me that is pointing out areas of growth or things that I can work with or things that I can like dive deeper into, says the Scorpio moon. I love diving deeper. Not everyone is going to resonate with those parts of their chart. But that's why you have different people who read different ways, different systems, and there's different avenues of connection with the self. Switching gears a little bit, Maddie, I want to know what is one ritual or practice that you do for your own self care, your own spirituality that's outside of what you do for business? Are there practitioners that you see? Is there a ritual that you do in the morning? Or are you like all in on breathwork and yoga and Vedic?
Oh gosh, that is a great question. I think I the first thing that came to mind is actually a different type of breath work. And I don't know if you guys have ever done holotropic breath work, but I think that is my favorite technique outside of what I do that I just cannot get enough of. It's definitely more activating breath work, so I can't do it as often as pranayama, which can still be activating, but not as intensely as holotropic breath work. But I actually did a version of holotropic breathwork last Friday. It was a shamanic breathwork journey at my friend's place, and she had a practitioner come in, and you just get these crazy downloads while you're doing it. Basically, what it is, it's super intense breath work that almost creates, well, what's similar to a psychedelic experience. Not that I've done psychedelics or anything, but it kind of has that same effect where like your body reacts in this way to where you start almost seeing things and maybe kind of having this almost out of body experience. And that probably, like I said, is just my favorite thing to do outside of what I personally teach because it's just such a wild experience, but I always leave it feeling so much more connected and like I've just released so much energy and emotion that hasn't been serving me, and I just come out of it feeling so refreshed.
Okay, I'm definitely gonna have to ask for recommendations. I've never done that, so add to cart.
I did it once and I felt like my arms were shaking and like tingling afterwards. It's a very like physical body
Yes,
Okay,
experience.
that's
love
a
that.
natural reaction to have is you get almost like lobster claws, like your hands get stuck like this. I remember one time I was doing it. Monica Baker used to do it at the Healing Society every other week. And
That's who led me
yes,
through
oh
it.
my God, she's a wonderful facilitator. I love doing her breath work. And I remember there was one time, like my arms were stuck like this, like on my chest. And I just remember just feeling almost like I was on a roller coaster ride. Like I saw myself just like flying through the solar system almost. And my arms are stuck, looking like I'm just like hanging on for dear life on a roller coaster. It's always such a beautiful experience. And you get something totally different every time.
That sounds amazing.
That's cool. Maddie, I'm curious if you could go back 5 years. We're almost at December, so pre-pandemic Maddie, what's one thing you wish you knew before you started down this path or something that you would have told yourself in that post-college professional era?
I think, ooh, this is a tough one because there's a lot of things that I would say. I would say good job leaving that business management firm. Did not enjoy that place. I think it would be to like take it easy on yourself. I was so hard on myself, especially, throughout college too. It's especially when you're getting into the music industry, like everyone says, "Oh, you have to live and breathe the industry. You have to be at an event every night. You have to be networking." Like, again, leaning into this whole hustle culture thing. And I was just like, I'm not an extrovert. I would much prefer to stay home and read a book and do crossword puzzles while my cat snuggles me. But I wish I would have realized that sooner and given myself more grace and not called myself a loser so often. I think because I wasn't as social as I was supposed to be in the music industry, and I didn't have that endless well of energy to just be going out and meeting everyone and playing shows and being able to just spark conversation out of nowhere. I'm also a projector in human design, so that is so not what a projector is supposed to do. I think I definitely would have given myself more grace, allowed myself more time. I would have told her to not get into so much credit card debt. So the more logical things. Again, that Virgo brain coming out. Yeah, I think grace is the number one thing.
Well, and it sounds like at the time it was the industry's version of success that made you feel like you said, you were calling yourself a loser because you weren't doing this and that. And it's no, this is just what they say success looks
Hmm.
like in this world, in this industry. And it's not what success looks
Yeah.
like for
And I
you.
think another thing too would be that you're allowed to change your mind. I was on this like tunnel vision journey since I was a sophomore in high school. And gosh, you changed so much from a sophomore in high school to graduating college. I wish that, again, would have given myself grace and allowed myself to change my mind sooner rather than being like, oh, well, I already have this degree. I'm already in this. Might as well just keep going. I think that, especially just in general, it's this idea that you have to be doing the same thing and the same job until you're in your 60s and then you can retire and have fun. No, you're allowed to change your mind. Screw what society says is right. You don't need that.
Oh my God, totally.
Absolutely.
Maria will tell you I love the tower card and I love to use it in my life all the time. Let's blow it up and redo it.
Yes.
Where's your tower? Do you have your tower on your desk, Katie? Your tower of
Yep,
Mercury?
sure do. I spent a lot of time trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. And now it feels like I can just make a lot of square holes to put my square pegs in.
Yes.
Which, speaking of, so Maddie, what's something you're excited about coming up in your business? What's going on in your world? Where can people find you? Give us a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah, so I'm definitely still doing readings now. I swear readings are like my bread and butter. I think I'm going to take some time during the holidays because I feel like it's just such a busy time in life that business can definitely slow down. And I'm allowing myself to do that, which was a hard decision to come to, let me tell you. But coming up, I actually do yoga classes at Heart of Wisdom Yoga Saturdays at noon, which I love doing. I incorporate breathwork and meditation into each of the classes. And I am currently in the process of creating a series of breathwork journeys that come into this program or course all about softening, releasing the should haves and the supposed tos, and softening into self. So that will be coming up next year around February, which I'm so excited about. And I feel like it's going to be a great time after everyone gets over the craziness of New Year's resolutions. We can allow ourselves to soften into self. But you can find me on Instagram at Maddie Frias. And I have a link there to sign up for readings. If you've had your Western chart done and you're like, okay, what is this Vedic stuff that they're talking about? So happy to read a chart and help you look into those other places that you might not have seen before. And then, yeah, I'll be at Heart of Wisdom as well. It's got to be like one of my favorite places to be.
Amazing. We'll link that in the show notes
Awesome.
where you can find Maddie.
Yes, absolutely. Maddie, last question is who else do you recommend that we interview?
Ooh, gosh, specifically from the conference or just in general?
In general.
Anybody?
Oh gosh. There's so many people that I could say. Raven, I don't know her last name. Wow, I didn't even think about that. But Raven, I've been working with her, and gosh, her knowledge on the history of spirituality. We had a meeting on Saturday, and she went into the like history of the language of the word shamanic and how a lot of European language actually comes from language in the Indus Valley and all this stuff. And I was just like, what? She's fascinating. I think I would probably recommend her. And then also because we talked about her, Monica Baker, and talking about holotropic breathwork, because oh my gosh, it's very different from pranayama, but in the most beautiful and crazy way. So I think those two would be who I would recommend 100%.
Awesome. Writing that down now. I know Raven and Monica, so we will reach out to them. Maddie, thank you so much for being here. We are so excited that you have been a guest on the podcast. We're even more excited for you to lead us through breathwork at the conference and for everyone to see you kind of in your magic. So thank you so much.
Thank you all for the opportunity. I'm so excited for the conference and to get to dive even deeper there.
We hope you loved that conversation with Maddie Frias from Madhouse. Don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, review this episode. We appreciate it so much, and we will see you next time.